Shalom, welcome to Mahdi's Ministry. We're going to go over some scriptures here about the role of the Antichrist and how that's fulfilled through the Mahdi of Islam. And in the book of Daniel, it talks about the Antichrist having a strange God. And this God is the God of Islam, which is known as Allah. And in Daniel 11:39 it says this, "Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain." Also in Daniel 11:38 it mentions this God, which is the God of forces, the God of jihadi armies, which is Allah. And in their black flag it says there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is their messenger, and this is the God of forces. Now in Daniel 11:38 it says, "But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things." This God is not known by the fathers, the ancients, because this God Allah of Islam is a new God. So looking to the role of the Antichrist and how that's fulfilled through Islam, looking into the teachings of Islam to find out who they are expecting and how that is fulfilled. And it's important to note that Islamic prophecy is not true prophecy. It is engineered by the hand of man, and it's forced to come to pass by the power of the elite to bring about their new world order. Now, the God of the Bible has foresaw all the things that Islam will do in the end to rise to power. And in that foreknowledge, he has warned us of the beginning and the end and how Islam will come to power. Yet, we can sit back and not do anything to force our prophecy to come to pass. We can just sit back and watch it come to pass. But Islam cannot do that, because Islam's prophecy is not from God and his foresight, but it is by Satan, who is Allah, and that is a deception that is used to bring about the end for the destruction of Christians through Islam. Now, going into some of their sources, IslamicWeb.com, in their reports about the Imam Mahdi, it says, "Who is Imam al-Mahdi? Mahdi is a normal man who is going to follow the true Islam." It's important to note here who they are looking for to fulfill this role and how the elite are engineering this role and these figures to come to pass by their own power. And in this it says in their article, "The Mahdi will be of my family and of the descendants of Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, who married Ali and begot Hassan and Hussein," Abu Dawood says in this commentary here. Now, it's important to note that they're looking for a man who will bear the name of Hussein. That's right. And it's interesting that Barack Hussein Obama is the man and the candidate that they have chosen to fulfill their role of the Islamic al-Mahdi. And we will go into that as you follow along with this video. Now, the role of the Mahdi, according to the Muslim view and more of their sources out of awaitedmahdi.com, it says here, various characteristics of the Mahdi. The concept of the end times and Mahdi may not be that familiar to some people. It will therefore be useful to clarify them before going any further. According to Islamic belief, the end times refers to a period close to doomsday when Quranic moral values will rule the world and spread widely among the peoples of the world. Now, this is exactly what is spoken about in Daniel 11:39, where it talks about he shall cause them to rule over many. And that's exactly what is being fulfilled in the Christian prophecy of the Antichrist, is the figure of the Islamic Mahdi bringing about a rule in the world. Going further into the awaitedmahdi.com, it says in characteristics about the Mahdi and how he has main tasks to fulfill. In one of them, in their article, it says here that the Mahdi's main task is to reveal and apply true Islamic moral values based on the commands of the Quran. Now, We remember that they just had mentioned in a previous Mahdi description characteristics that it's just a normal man that will rise to power, who will follow the true Islam, bearing the name of Hussein, and he will reveal and apply true Islamic moral values based on these commands. It's interesting to see that Barack Hussein Obama, with their controlled crisis of the ISIS group, is being used to help further the Islamic prophecy through their offering of moderate Islam as the solution to the crisis. And interesting how Obama steps up to lecture on Islamic eschatology. In this article, it says here, AmericanThinker.com, Obama lectures ISIS on Islamic theology. There are many reports about Obama actually speaking against ISIS and their theology and how they do not relate to Islam. And it's very clear, JewishPress.com reports here, Obama decides that ISIS does not speak for Islam, August 22nd. And a transcript out of President Obama's remarks on the execution of the journalist James Foley by Islamic State on August 20th, he says, quote, "So ISIL speaks for no religion. Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim." And that comes out of WashingtonPost.com. So he's exalting himself into a position of a person who has authority over what is Islam and what is not. And that's the role of the Mahdi, is actually to declare what's authentic Islam and what is not Islam. And that's what the Bible prophecy in the book of Daniel chapter 11:36 says, "And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god." And that is exactly what Barack Hussein Obama is doing when he says, so ISIL speaks for no religion. He's exalting himself above all religions and making himself an authority. And then he continues on with this. CNN.com reported on September 11, 2014, strong reaction to Obama's statement, quote, ISIL is not Islamic. President Obama was trying to make a broader point when he uttered ISIL is not Islamic. But the four-word phrase could still come back to haunt him. And that's a very clear thing, that Obama is actually decreeing what is the true way of Islam, and that's exactly what they're saying that they're looking for as a characteristic of their Mahdi. Now going back in June 4th of 2009, where Obama gave his Cairo speech, it says here in this article out of the whitehouse.gov, remarks by the president on a new beginning. I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world. Quote, as the Holy Quran tells us, be conscious of God and speak always the truth. That is what I try to do today, to speak the truth as best I can, humbled by the task before us and firm in my belief that the interests we share as human beings are far more powerful than the forces that drive us apart. That's exactly what Obama is doing. He's calling for the unity of Islam. He's calling for a declaration of what true, authentic Islam is. He's declaring the Holy Quran. And uniting Muslims in his new beginning actually is another characteristic of the Mahdi. According to the WeightedMahdi.com website, for an Islamic source, it says various characteristics of the Mahdi. The Mahdi will have the main task of to strengthen the Islamic world politically and socially, to establish peace and security and well-being, to resolve social problems. Another identification of their Mahdi out of Irshad.org says, identification of the prophesied Imam Mahdi. The Holy Prophet Muhammad has prophesied about several events that will occur just before the advent of the Day of Judgment. Among these, Rasulullah has foretold the advent of one of his descendants, Al-Mahdi, the guided one, which will materialize when the believers are severely oppressed in every corner of the world. He will fight the oppressors, unite the Muslims, bring peace and justice to the world. And this is exactly what the Imam of Malay had asked Obama to help end, was the oppression of the Muslims. And this is what was reported on April 27th out of the CNSnews.com. It says, Imam to Obama, end oppression of Muslims. Obama to Imam, pray for me. Visiting Malaysia's National Mosque on Sunday, President Obama was asked by the institution's imam to end oppression against Muslims worldwide. Malaysia's national press agency, Bernama, reported. Quote, Obama also said that every day when he wakes up, he always does his best to put an end to oppression and conflicts affecting communities, end of quote. Bernama quoted Ismail as saying, and the 70-year-old cleric said that Obama had frequently replied with Insya Allah Mele, for Allah willing, which is fulfillment of the prophecy where it talks about he will acknowledge, a God whom he will acknowledge. And that is what Obama has done. WashingtonPost.com reports in wake of the uniting of the Muslims and Obama's role of using the ISIS crisis to be able to unite the Muslim world. It says here, transcript, President Obama's August 28th remarks on Ukraine, Syria, and the economy, quote, and a part of our message to the entire region is this should be a wake-up call to Sunni and to Shia, to everybody that a group like ISIS is beyond the pale, that they have no vision or ideology beyond violence and chaos and the slaughter of innocent people. And as a consequence, we've got to all join together, even if we have differences on a range of political issues, to make sure that they're rooted out. And that is what Obama is saying. They're needing to unite the Arab and Muslim world, a part of his new beginning that he spoke about. SunTimes.com reported on the same agenda of Obama. Transcript, Obama, Estonia's ILV's joint press conference, September 3rd, 2014. It says, quote, what we've got to do is make sure that we are organizing the Arab world, the Middle East, the Muslim world, along with the international community. And that is a quote from Barack Hussein Obama. In regards to that, uniting of the Arab world, September 7th, JerusalemPost.com reports Arab League endorses U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State. Arab League elected on Sunday to join Europe and the United States in its confrontation with the Islamic State. This is exactly what Obama is using, this crisis, to be able to unite all the moderate Muslims. The whole smokescreen about uniting the moderates will end with the same thing, with an Islamic caliphate. Both radical Islam and moderate Islam both desire to have an Islamic caliphate globally, so you do not have any choice on whether you support a Islamic terrorist or an Islamic moderate. Either way, you end up with the same outcome, with an Islamic state ruling the earth according to their desire. Now back to the characteristics of the Mahdi. Various characteristics of the Mahdi in awaitedmahdi.com. It also says here that the Mahdi will have the task to combat superstition by freeing Islam from the hypocrites who have corrupted it. Now this is exactly what Obama is doing. They're using this crisis that they've engineered to be able to bring about their solution to make Obama appear to fulfill the role to combat this group, to end the oppression of Muslims, to help liberate and free Islam from these hypocrites who have corrupted their view of the true interpretation of Islam. And using the controlled crisis to engineer the solution to unite the world moderates is exactly what the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, is working alongside the same agenda to get a global caliphate. WorldBulletin.net reports OIC chief Madani, Islamic State, quote, harms Islam, end of quote. August 26, 2014. Iyad Medini, head of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, asserted Tuesday that the so-called Islamic State militant group harms Islam. So the real Islamic caliphate is a moderate caliphate that will be through the OIC. Now, ISIS is also being used to as an excuse for the platform for the false prophet to unite all world religions, to point to the Antichrist as the world political authority. Now, we see that in the news out of Jerusalem Post. We see how the ISIS crisis has been an excuse for them to call for a world body of the interfaith group, which we've been warning that the Pope will be using the interfaith platform to unite all world religions and point to Islam, but their version of what is authentic Islam as a world religious authority, which is fulfillment of the role of the false prophet. Now here's the platform. Jerusalem Post reports Shimon Peres proposes United Nations for Religion to Pope at Vatican, September 5th, 2014. Vatican City. Former President Shimon Peres emerged from a Vatican City audience with Pope Francis Thursday after proposing a kind of United Nations for Religion. The main topic of the conversation was Perez's idea to create a UN-like organization he called, quote, the United Religions, end of quote. Perez said the Argentina-born pontiff was the only world figure respected enough to bring an end to the wars raging in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. In the past, he says, in the past, Most of the wars in the world were motivated by the idea of nationhood, end of quote. Perez said, quote, but today wars are incited using religion as an excuse, end of quote. Perez praised Pope Francis as the only world figure respected across national boundaries and different faiths. In an interview with Catholic magazine Famiglia Christiana, Perez called on Francis to leverage his respect to create an interfaith organization to curb religious violence. Quote, what we need is an organization of united religions as the best way to combat terrorists who kill in the name of faith, end of quote. Perez said, quote, what we need is an unquestionable moral authority who says out loud, quote, no, God does not want this and does not allow it, end of quote. Now that is ultimately the full role of the false prophet, to have full religious authority to decree what is acceptable and what is not by their interfaith council, and say what God does approve of and what he does not approve of. That is the role of the false prophet, a false mouthpiece for God. And that's what's spoken about in Revelation chapter 13, 11, and 12, where it talks about the one who appears to be like a lamb, who appears to be like Jesus, the Lamb of God, but speaks like a dragon, which is the devil. The devil's the dragon, that serpent of old, so he's a deceiver. Now, he exercises the power of the first beast before him, which is the role of the false prophet. And if you look into popes of the past, they've crowned the kings to rule over the empire since Charlemagne in 800 AD. You'll see that the Pope actually crowned the Holy Roman emperors to rule over the empire. That's the same figurative role, as they have the authority of the power of the first beast before him, and that first beast is the Antichrist. So he will exalt the Antichrist through that interfaith council and cause them to bow, and that word worship means to bow and submit into that authority. Now, the Mahdi is believed to be one that will help lead to their peace and security, according to their Islamic site. AwaitedMahdi.com says, various characteristics of the Mahdi, the end times, is a holy time that all believers have longed for down the years, when Islamic values will rule the world, and when shortages and scarcity are replaced by plenty and abundance, when injustice gives way to justice, and when conflict is replaced by peace and security. Now, that goes back to the same thing in one of their main tasks of the characteristics of the Mahdi. It says to strengthen the Islamic world politically and socially, and to establish peace and security. So they're looking for this man to establish peace and security. Now, it says here in the scripture, 1 Thessalonians 5:3, for when they say peace and safety, and then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. This is exactly what is said. It's warned about. G803 for the word safety is actually the word for security. So you can understand that that says peace and security, and it's exactly what they're looking for. Now, going back to Obama, WashingtonPost.com reports March 26, full transcript, President Obama gives speech addressing Europe, Russia, on March 26. Going forward, every NATO member state must step up and carry its share of the burden by showing the political will to invest in our collective defense by developing the capabilities to serve as a source of international peace and security. And that's what Obama is actually calling for. And it is not the only time. This has came out of his mouth many times, and you can see that BBC.com reported July 15th when Obama was talking about the peace in the Middle East for the two-state solution, which is mentioned in the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 39, where it talks about he will divide the land for gain. In that reference, it says here, President Obama urges peace in Gaza Strip. President Obama has called for, quote, peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians, end of quote, at a speech in Washington. So this is exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for this man. They're engineering this role. Obama's pushing forward to fulfill the role of the Mahdi by his own power, by the seat through the United States presidency. He will ultimately go on to the Middle East after they have formed their Islamic caliphate to reign as the Al-Mahdi of Islam in the New World Order, and their political authority that the Pope will exalt. Now, answeringislam.com, answeringislam.org, forgive me, actually mentions about the Mahdi, Islam's awaited Messiah or Savior to come, however they want to word it. It's a false Messiah. It says here, he will appear on the appointed day and he will fight against the forces of evil, lead a world revolution, and set up a new world order based upon justice. And they say in this, ultimately the righteous will take the world administration in their hands and Islam will be victorious over all the religions. And that came out of Al-Sadar, Mutahari Prologue, pp. 4 and 5. And that's exactly what they're setting up. They're setting up for a new world order led by the Mahdi of Islam, and that will come through World War III. According to onislam.net, there also is sources explaining about their view on the Mahdi. It says, who is the Mahdi? But this prophecy about the Mahdi fills the hearts of believers with new enthusiasm to fight injustice and oppression with greater vigor, because the New World Order represented by the Mahdi is a beacon that beckons believers to move forward along the path of God. So they're looking to establish a New World Order represented by the Mahdi. Interesting how the wording now is coming out of Obama's mouth. July 22nd, 2014, Politico.com reported Obama in Seattle. Barack Obama talks of unease about the world. It says here, quote, parts of people's concern is just the sense that around the world the old order isn't holding and we're not quite yet where we need to be in terms of a new order that's based on a different set of principles. Now, back in 2009, Henry Kissinger, a very well-known New World Order guy, actually had this to say about Barack Hussein Obama as he was coming into office. Out of WND.com, it reports Kissinger, Obama primed to create New World Order. January 6, 2009, it's quoted here, Henry Kissinger saying this, quote, I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. And that's speaking about Obama. And August 29th, 2014, Wall Street Journal just released about Henry Kissinger on the assembly of a new world order and his plans and a book that he's writing. And that just came out. Now, at the same time that all this is being set up to have a new world order is no coincidence. And this is exactly and Henry Kissinger knows this. That's why he is actually talking about Iran and ISIS right now, about how Iran is a bigger problem, okay, for their establishment than ISIS. And let me explain why. It says here out of alarabia.net, Henry Kissinger calls Iran a bigger problem than ISIS, September 7th. Why did he say that? Because Henry Kissinger knows the reason for the New World Order. He knows about all the inside information. He's a very, very knowledgeable man about their New World Order agenda. And specifically why he pointed to Iran is because Iran wants to help establish a New World Order as well. So there's a conflict of interest. Okay? BusinessInsider.com reports Iran's supreme leader prepare for the New World Order September 8th, 2014, shortly after Henry Kissinger released the report about his new book about the New World Order. That's why he said that Iran's a bigger problem than ISIS. Now, you see here in this article, it says, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warns that the, quote, New World Order is emerging, end of quote, and that, quote, Iran will have a strong role in creating it, end of quote. It, according to a Farsi language transcript of Khamenei's remarks late last week to the country's assembly of experts, Iran will lead this, quote, New World Order, end of quote, that will replace American influence as capitalism and Western influence collapses, according to Khamenei, who underwent surprise prostate surgery on Monday. Quote, Iran will have a strong role in creating the New World Order, end of quote, Khamenei said, explaining that Tehran would expand its already growing influence in Latin America and even Asia. And the reason why they said that is because they're aligned with the BRICS nations, which we'll cover. The current military setting up for the Middle East conflict is actually the preparation for the first seal. And in that, you'll see in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, it's talking about the rise of the Antichrist. It says, And I saw and beheld a white horse, and he that sat up on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. This is the military planning that's going on right now on the news. This is all the talk about interventions and arming of the moderates. All of this is actually in preparation for why there's a conflict in the Middle East. It's going to be that rise to power, going forth into conquering and conquer. And Muslims believe that Revelation chapter 6 verse 2 actually is referring to their Mahdi as well. Now, looking at this map here, you'll notice this region in black is the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is 57 Islamic states stating the goal of an Islamic caliphate through the international community. Now, there's 3 countries here that are on the map that are in red. It's Egypt, Syria, and Iran, and these are all backed by Russia and the BRICS members. That's why Tehran was expanding its growing influence in Latin America and even Asia, because they're with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in alliance to establish their New World Order. Now, the opposite spectrum of that is that the G7 nations actually want to lead in the establishment of the New World Order, and they have aligned themselves with the OIC to build that Islamic caliphate so that they could push Russia out of the Middle East influence through regime changes and backing the moderates so they could take the lead in the New World Financial Order. Now, this is metronews.ca. Metronews.ca. It says here about the G7, which are the 7 heads of the beast. And it says here, G7 officials plan meeting on Islamic State strategy. So you see that they're in alignment together. Now, Revelation chapter 12 verse 3 refers to these 7 heads. And it says here, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. That means there's 7 crowns upon each of those heads. That means there's 1 crown for 1 head, and a crown represents a king. So there's a ruler over that head. Now, if you look into the prophecy, Revelation 17, verse 9, you see, and here is mine which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Now, to get the interpretation of what these 7 mountains are and why there's crowns on the heads, which there's crowns on these mountains, it's because it's a prophetic term. The word mountain is used to describe a nation of power. And you see that when you go to Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 25, it talks about Babylon, the nation of Babylon, a kingdom who had a king over it, being called a mountain. It says here, behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth, and I will stretch out my hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks, and I will make thee a burnt mountain. So you get the interpretation that the 7 heads are 7 mountains, which are 7 nations of power who have 7 kings or rulers over them, and that's why you see in Revelation 12 verse 3 the 7 heads having 7 crowns, because this is the G7 nations, which are the 7 heads of the beast, who are in war with BRICS right now for the lead in the establishment of the New World Financial Order. This is why we see BRICS Bank here, August 23rd, a New World Order. The financialexpress-bd.com says the announcement of the launching of a development bank by the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa countries last month has generated mixed reactions, centering mostly around the query whether this initiative, jointly struck by the 5 potentially powerful nations, is going to institute a new world order by way of challenging, if not thwarting, the influence of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And this is exactly what the Vatican called for in 2011. When you see FoxNews.com reported here, October 24, 2011, Vatican calls for New World Economic Order. The Vatican called Monday for radical reform of the world's financial systems, including the creation of a global political authority to manage the economy. A proposal by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace calls for a new world economic order based on ethics and, quote, achievement of a universal common good, end of quote. The proposal acknowledges, however, that a long road still needs to be traveled before arriving at the creation of a public authority with universal jurisdiction, end of quote, and suggests the reform process begin with the United Nations as a point of reference. Now, why are they talking about the reform of the United Nations as a base for a new world order? And this is why. The United Nations Security Council is the current world order formed out of World War II. It is the solution for the crisis of World War II. World War III will bring about the formation of the new world order out of the reform of the United Nations Security Council. The Security Council permanent members are split between G7 and BRICS members, both in fight for the establishment of the New World Order. Those are members of the G7, and Russia and China, which are members of the BRICS alliance. Now, September 12th, Al-Arabiya .net reported U.S. rivals Islam anti-ISIS strategy. Now, talking about the strategy for that regime change on that map that we see with Syria, with Iran, and with Egypt, and how they're backed by Russia, and they want to get rid of Russian influence in the Middle East for their caliphate, for the New World Order. You see they're reporting about this right now. This is a part why they're going to have their crisis come about, is because that whole reform in the region, the regime change, and the establishment of the New World Order, that's what we're seeing right here. That's going to be that crisis, that conflict that will be big enough for them to actually reform that Security Council between the members of G7 and BRICS on the permanent member of the Security Council, who have a conflict of interests. Now. It says here in this article, both Iran and Syria slammed late Thursday the United States for excluding them from an international coalition aimed at combating the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. The strongest reaction, however, came from Russia. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's main international ally, a Russian foreign ministry statement said such military action without UN Security Council resolution, quote, would be an act of aggression and flagrant violation of international law, end of quote. So we see that this conflict, because the G7 have aligned themselves with the OIC and the Arab states in order to remove Russia and the influence of their puppets in the Middle East so they can establish a caliphate, are actually going to lead to a major collision. And Russia knows this. This is the whole conflict that you see in the Ukraine. It's actually more for their defense of the European Union once they go into the Middle East and intervene to remove these regimes, that they're trying to set up in Ukraine a NATO defense shield to protect the Eastern European border from Russian attacks or retaliation during the Middle East regime changes of these Russian allies. That's why you see that. And interesting how the ISIS group continues to be used to actually help regime change all these people that they need, and then they have the excuse to come in because of ISIS. It's all an engineered crisis so they can provide the solution. Now we know that the prophecy says that Egypt actually will be overthrown by the Antichrist. And this is because they do, the Sisi, the President Sisi actually overthrew their Muslim Brotherhood plants in Egypt, who are helping to establish that caliphate for the moderates, and Sisi has aligned himself with Russia. So now we're seeing the hand of Obama and the Islamic agenda, they will go against the leadership of Egypt. And that's what it says in the prophecy in Daniel 11:42. It says about the Antichrist, it says, he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. And this is exactly why we see Al-Arabiya.net reporting about ISIS, September 13th, actually being set up to come against Egypt. And this is all part of the regime changes, just like Iraq. It says here in this article, ISIS eyeing up Egypt as its next target, experts say. Quote, there is definitely a threat from ISIS to Egypt, end of quote. Mohammed Bardar, a professor of political science at the University of Germany, told Al Arabiya News, adding that the group has the country in its, quote, line of sight. And that's because Obama has his eye set on regime change in Egypt to get rid of the Russian influence. All this conflict and the regime changes in the Middle East ultimately will lead to World War III, which will have a reform of that Security Council to form that new world order. And the OIC is actually working towards that goal, to get on that reform. So they have the world platform of the international community to be able to have Islamic dominance on the Security Council. And that's what they're working for right now. OICUN.org reported in October 28th of 2013, UN Security Council meeting on strengthening partnership with OIC. Nsanglu stresses OIC's commitment to active partnership and the need for UN Security Council reform. He stressed on OIC's strong commitment to an active partnership with the United Nations in promoting peace and security and development. He also emphasized the need to reform the United Nations Security Council. This is what is going to happen. There's going to be World War III. That is what follows that regime change those military actions, the first seal rising to power, will bring about a conflict of World War III. That's what is spoken about as the second seal in prophecy. And it says in Revelation chapter 6, verse 3 and 4, "And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him that sat on thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword." Peace being taken from the earth means peace taken from the world. And when peace is removed from the world, war fills the world. This means World War III. And this is what's on the horizon right now. We see that. Pope Francis is mentioning that. World's conflicts amount to piecemeal World War III, September 15th, 2014, charismanews.com reports. And this is serious. We're about to enter the tribulation, and prepare the way of the Lord. Keep your eyes set on the Lord Jesus. This is Martis Ministry, Prophecy in the News. Shalom.